everybody. My name is Dave Jackson, and this is Tales from the Backlog, where each week I'm joined by a guest to bring a game out of the backlog, play it, and discuss. My guest today is a friend of the show, podcast and video producer and podcaster for NoClip, among many other things out there, and an eccentric artist in his own right. Welcome to the show, Jesse Guarascia.
Yo, happy to be here. Thanks for having me on, Dave.
It's great to have you here. We're going to have a really fun game to talk about today. So I needed to get a fellow Lorelei and the Laser Eyes sicko on the podcast today. So welcome.
Yeah, Game of the Year 2024, I think.
Yeah, it would have made my list had I played it sooner, but we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. Today's game is Lorelei and the Laser Eyes, a puzzle game developed by Simogo and published by Annapurna Interactive for contemporary consoles and PC in 2024. And hey, if this is your first time on the show, your first time listening or watching, thank you for stopping by. Here is how spoilers work. We're not going to spoil the story, and we're not going to talk about puzzle solutions in Lorelei and the Laser Eyes for a while. You can check down in the show notes for a timestamp for when spoilers begin. Until that point, you're safe. We're going to talk about basically everything else. So, no spoilers for a while. But what is Lorelei and the Laser Eyes? If you are here and you don't know what this game is, we have some quick pitches for you. I say Lorelei and the Laser Eyes is a Resident Evil inspired puzzle box with lots to say about the artistic process. Jesse, what would you say?
Ooh, that's good. That's like a very clear definition. I would say it is like a Mobius strip shaped puzzle, or not puzzle, maze. That folds in on itself and expands outward infinitely, I feel like, the more you play it.
While playing the game, I was really wondering how deep this, or how far this maze went. And that's a good descriptive type of puzzle for what this is. A maze, for sure.
I'd say it's amazing.
Off to a good start. There we go. That is why I brought you on the show.
Welcome to the pun zone.
Yeah. I'm surprised there weren't more pun-based puzzles in Lorelei, but yeah. I played this on PC, took 17 and a half hours to get through it. I will say now, I wonder if that's on the shorter side. How long did it take you to get through?
Goodness gracious. I lost my original save because I wrote over it to replay the game to talk about it with you here. But my Steam time is now 35.9 hours. So if we cut that in half, like 18, that feels right.
Yeah, and even if you allow for second playthrough being a little bit faster, I was going to say I thought my playthrough is probably on the shorter end based on Steam Friends, and that's because I used a guide for the last maybe 5 hours of gameplay.
How dare you?
I was big stumped by what was going on here. So suffice to say, like we always like to talk about, like, you know, the type of game and how long it is. I think this is pretty long for a puzzle game.
Yeah, very long. The fact that there's so much content, not just in your being confused and lost while playing the game, that is part of, I think, its charm, is that it's so confusing and yet so open. Like you can go anywhere and do anything. But yeah, the fact that there's 10 plus hours of content for a puzzle game is just, how do you even do it? People struggle to make 10 hours of a walking sim. Like, get out of here. What do you mean?
Yeah, it's and especially when we get into talking about like what kind of puzzles are in the game, like it's not like they're long drawn out puzzles. Like the individual puzzles that you do are very quick hit type things for the most part. It's just the way that they fold in and layer on top of each other. In this, like we said, it's like, it really reminds me of the Resident Evil 1 mansion, where it's just, you know, all interconnected, one thing leads to three other things type of design here. So it goes for a while.
Yeah, and the fact that there are shortcuts like the Resident Evil sort of level design. I mean, are we talking about the game mode? Are we doing it? Is this?
We've gotten into it a little bit. Let me introduce us a little bit, and we'll revisit kind of talking about the game itself. Look at it. We can't help ourselves. We're jumping.
It's
jumping
so
ahead.
Exciting.
Yeah. First off, want to say the principal design credits for most of the stuff in Lorelei and the Laser Eyes are for two people. and I didn't look up pronunciation, so here we go. Simon Flesser and Magnus Gardebeck. Simogo is primarily a two-person studio, so when you look through the credits, it's mostly two people, although there are other contributors along the way as well. We'll shout out main contributors as we go. So, real quick, I invited you on to talk about this game because I heard you on the Game of the Year No Clip Crewcast talking about this and how much you loved it. What originally made you want to play Lorelei and the Laser Eyes?
So I think I saw a trailer for this in like a state of play or some sort of showcase for games. And the original trailer is just a bunch of cuts of faces or like character models zooming closer or further away from the camera. And that was it. And I was like, I don't know what that is. I want to play it. By the people who made Sayonara Wild Hearts, a game I have not played. Like, I was interested in playing this knowing nothing about Simogo's pedigree. I had heard of Year Walk. That was about it. And I knew of Sayonara because of the visuals. But this, I don't know what it was. It was just monochrome and purple. I got to play it. That's all it took for me.
It is really interesting because, like, I'm with you. I was interested the first time I saw what the game looked like, but I don't think I saw that trailer that you're talking about. I just kind of saw like a screenshot. And I was like, oh, that aesthetic looks really cool. Yeah. I didn't know it was by the same people who made Sayonara Wild Hearts, which I've played like 3 or 4 times now.
Oh, wow.
It's just a really easy game to pick up, and it's like 50 minutes long. Just pick up and play through it when you're, bored or, just want to play something kind of refreshing because it's so different from anything else probably you're going to play. I love that game, but I didn't know this was the same people. And it wasn't really until some reviews came out and some of my friends did reviews for it and they talked really highly of it. But it really wasn't until Game of the Year time when I was like, let's make sure that I play this sometime. And I got a little extra push because I got this in our Discord server Secret Santa. So thank you to Dan from Canada for gifting me Lorelei and the Laser Eyes.
Oh, shout out Dan. You know what's up, Canadians. We like good video games.
Yeah. So that was what got me to play it. And I really, really like this game. It's like one of the coolest games I've played in a while. I came out of it thinking like, so I really like it, but I think I respect it even more than I always liked playing it. Like I said, I got really stumped by puzzles. It's like puzzle games inherently, like I think a lot of people are going to reach a point where you're tempted by the guide. And then once you break that wall of the guide, I find it really hard to go back to that pure playthrough of like not checking the guide anymore. So when I met big resistance from puzzle stuff, I went to the guide and I stayed there in here. And then there was a little bit of like dissonance between I was trying to figure out the story and trying to marry it to what you're doing. And I'll talk about this a lot later, but I just want to like plant that seed that kind of like made me wonder like, what are they doing here? And it wasn't really clear until much, 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 much later what they're doing. So planting that seed. But I think this game's really cool. And it's like, aside from, the presentation and the music, which is like a home run in my opinion, it's a really satisfying puzzle box to go through too. It's the same type of fun that you would have unraveling all the layers in Resident Evil 1 of like all of these rooms and all these places where you think that, you're trying to remember like, this key goes to this door. I have this entire wing I couldn't access before. Like, I can't wait till I get to go in there and see what's in there. Like, this game gives you those great feelings too. So I really, really like this.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think Lorelei and the Laser Eyes is doing for escape room puzzle games what, maybe not to the same extent, but what like Animal Well did for Metroidvanias or Tunic did for Zelda-style adventure games. It's not quite the meta depth that those games have, but taking it and sort of elevating it in this very classy and like it just has this sheen to it. Lorelei and the Laser Eyes, this like individual art style motif stuff going on with the music and the characters and the art style that is so, I don't want to say mature because that sounds reductive to the Resident Evil series, but it just takes the escape room again style puzzle design of that series and goes, what about that is fun, right? What about solving puzzles in this world in these sort of esoteric, bizarre ways where suits of playing cards can also be the shape of a key for a door, right? How do you make that make sense in this world that itself doesn't make any sense? Like Lorelei and the Laser Eyes is one of those games where you have to accept that not knowing anything is okay, and at some point you may learn something, and maybe you never will, but you have to enjoy the ride and just let it wash over you almost. And that part for me also was like, I was so surprised at the fact that somebody who desperately for a very long time was like, I want to know what's going on. I'm not one of those wiki guys. I'm not like, checking to make sure all of my assumptions are correct. But with Lorelei, I was like, I want to know what's going on. I want to know who Lorelei is. Why does she have laser eyes? What's going on with Renzo, right? But none of that is really like, that's not really the core of the game. I feel like the joy that I got out of it in the end was being confused. Oddly, did you have a similar experience where, like, even though you couldn't follow what was going on, you still almost the fact that you didn't, was that something that you enjoyed, or was that something that like you found impenetrable?
No, I was definitely intrigued by like the unknown. I was intrigued by the unknown as like from the gameplay side of it, as in like, I found this grandfather clock. What the fuck do I do with this? Like that unknown. But I was also very intrigued by the story side of it too, where like you have these characters, they obviously have this relationship, they have these roles to play in this greater story, but the game is just not going to let you in for a while. And so I was in on that stuff too. And I think you hit on like two things that really make that compelling gameplay work. It's that like learning the language of the game in the way that Tunic and Animal Well teach you their own respective languages gives you progression just as much as like individual puzzles, because there are common types of puzzles around. And once you learn what that type of puzzle wants from you, then you can go and make a whole bunch of progress all at once. Like that stuff is great. And then you get that kind of Metroidvania-ish good feeling of like, I have a new key. I'm going to go through and unlock all these doors and see what I can find. And I'll get some story bits. I'll get some new types of puzzles. I'll uncover new mysteries to be befuddled by. And all of that stuff just like kept me playing. So like it's a long puzzle game, and it probably should have been longer in my playthrough had I not artificially shortened it. But I was never bored by what I was doing. I was always compelled to keep playing.
Good. Yeah. I think that's probably what they were aiming for, right? Was to make something that for most players was going to be tough, if anything, impossible at times, feeling impossible. Like still giving you the branches, the little opportunities, right? The obvious information they give you where the solution is literally written and underlined in a note, but also giving you opportunities to walk around and go, oh, this reminds me of this thing I saw earlier. Can you connect the dots? Can I figure out in what way these things go together? Yeah, just such a masterfully designed game that feels so impossible and yet so approachable at the same time.
Yeah, one of those games for sure that if you ever start to like try and put yourself on the other side, like, and just wonder like logistically, how did they put this together? You'd be like, this is crazy how organized they must have been to make sure that all of this fit in the perfect way that it ends up fitting. Like,
which is so interesting because they have like this sort of mini documentary that they did. It's like 8 or 9 minutes long, where the team and a bunch of their contributors talked about the development of the game. And it turns out that most of Lorelei and the Laser Eyes structure didn't come together until the last year, which is usually the case for game development. It's usually like everything kind of comes together in the last set of months. But this seems like this impossible weaving of design and storytelling and layout that you couldn't possibly put together in such a short window of time, and yet that's how it happened.
Yeah, it's crazy. Well, we've got a lot to dig into, so let's take a little music break, and when we come back, we're going to set up the story of Lorelei and the Laser Eyes. And The Laser Eyes has you playing as an unnamed woman who is summoned to this mansion hotel out in the forest called the Hotel Letzis Jahr, which means last year, by an eccentric artist named Renzo Nero. And so your character drives up into the forest. You leave your car there, very Silent Hill 2 to drive up and just leave your car. And then you go into the hotel. You're not really sure why you're there. It's this very vague, like, you're here to help with something that Nero is doing, like some artistic project or something like that. But what you actually find in the hotel is this ever unfolding puzzle box of like actual puzzles that are locking doors and gating progress and stuff like that as you're going through. So this introduction is like full of mystery. They don't tell you shit really about what this story is actually about. And we're not going to say that in the non-spoiler section because that's a kind of a revelation. Like, what is this game from a story perspective? But we already said, I think, like, I was very compelled by this story. I don't know if I got your side of that too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like 100%. I was just so locked in basically from the beginning. This impossible feeling story basically from start to finish until the last like 5 or 10 minutes where it all sort of comes together. From the very beginning. Yeah. Like you said, the setup of this car in the middle of the woods, you walk around and one of the first things you see before you get to the mansion or hotel is like a magician's cart that you can't enter. And you're like,
Yeah.
where am I? Is this a real place or is it a dream? Like by the time you get in and you pet the dog that you find pretty early on, you're like, is this dog even real? What am I doing?
Yeah. Because the dog has like a note tied to its collar that's like got the a hint for the gate password. And it's, yeah.
So good.
You're really thrown out of reality pretty early on in there. And that's not to say that like what's going on in the game isn't real or anything like that, but it throws you off and you're constantly wondering what is real and what's not real, for sure. You're also learning in the story about the life of this artist and programmer named Lorelei Weiss, not sure, they don't say in the game, but you learn about her and how her story connects to Nero's, and her name is in the title of the game, so you know she's an important character as well. So not going to say too much about like what the plot is, we'll say. Also worth noting, this game's super non-linear. Like your progression can be pretty non-linear, and the way the story is told is extremely fucking non-linear and abstract and weird. So like you said, like up until the last 5 or 10 minutes of the game, not an exaggeration, I had no fucking idea what was going on in the story until literally the end. So that ending was satisfying though, I take it.
Yeah, I feel like it gave enough information, enough conclusatory stuff where I wasn't still questioning if what I saw made any amount of sense. I wouldn't lie to you and say that by the end of the game, I felt fully confident in my interpretation of the story. But I definitely by the end of it was like, okay, I know enough that when I play this again, which I have again for this, I will be able to follow it at least a little bit better the second time around.
Yeah. I know I texted you and I was like, scale of 1 to 10, how confident do you feel? And both of us were like, I don't know, 3, 4, something like that, which is where I ended up. And then like with, watching the ending again and watching some story stuff, I kind of like came up to maybe a 6 or 7, which is probably the level I'm going to take into the spoiler section. So it's going to be another one of these spoiler sections where I'm like, our job is not to explain the story to you. Yeah. We're just going to like talk about interpretations, because a lot of it is still up for interpretation as well. Themes to watch out for. Big themes on display. This game has a lot to say about art, a lot about the artistic process, a lot about artists themselves, the roles of artist versus the roles of the audience in the entire artistic process, from like conception of an idea to an audience taking it in and forming their own ideas. There's the artist Nero, Renzo Nero, has a lot of opinions about that, which I think was really interesting to chew on as you go around. And one of the ways that story is delivered in the game is by picking up journal entries, letters, script pages, stuff like that. So whenever you find one of those, they're usually useful for puzzles, but they also have story stuff that as you're walking around the mansion, as you're lost, as you said, there was a lot of my playtime was like, I don't know where I'm supposed to be going right now, so I'm just going to go poke at every single corner that I know of until I open up some new progress. And while I'm doing that, I'm thinking about these themes of, I read a note about how Renzo Nero fucking hates his audiences, so I'm going to think about that as like a story thing to think of. And he's an obsessive, an eccentric weirdo of a person in general. So as I'm going around, I really liked thinking about these things, and I'm excited to revisit these in the spoiler section.
Yeah, same, especially with like the way that Renzo's story overlaps with Lorelei's, and their different perspectives on the creation of art. Their different perspectives on like the creation of art in a literal sense and in a metaphorical sense of like, what does it mean to bear your soul into work, but then also literally creating art. What is that like? What does that mean to you as a person? Because, again, without getting too deep into it, Lorelei is very like a prodigy almost, like loves her work and is so good at it, where Nero or Renzo's character is perhaps has a different perspective on creating things. Like you said, he has opinions on making art. So a lot of this game is just experiencing, I think, this, especially the second time through, but even the first time through is just experiencing the way that art can affect you as a person and who experiences it, like you said, as the audience, but then also if you are someone who has ever made any attempt at doing art either for yourself or for money or for whatever, like it just, I feel like there's so many different perspectives you can come at this story and the way that it's told. It's another part of what makes the ever weaving maze that is Lorelei and the Laser Eye so impressive to me.
Yeah, for sure. You can definitely see it from the perspective of the artist as you read how Nero thinks about the way his art is received and how he's obsessed with this process and he's obsessed with making perfect art, whatever that is to him. And he's also obsessed with how other people perceive it and not satisfied with how other people perceive it, and also not satisfied with how things are affected when money gets involved, when you have to get funding for your new movies or something like that. So from that perspective, this character at least has a lot to say, for sure. And then, when these things are brought up, you can start to really get into conversations of what is everybody's role as far as like, what's the artist's role? And then what's my role as the person consuming it? And then if we want to take it a step further on a podcast such as this, what is a role of a critic who's then, talking about that? Right. This game is dealing with all of that. And it was really interesting to think about as I was, trying to, I swear this door is unlocked. Why is it locked? As I'm moving around the mansion, being lost or looking for something I may have missed the first 2 times I was in that room, stuff like that. This kind of like clashed, I thought, a little bit when I tried to think of how what you're doing in the game marries with these themes. I had a little bit of a dissonance in my head because what you're actually doing in the game is these mostly very simple puzzles. Like, I described them before as like, if you bought a book of 150 puzzles at an airport gift shop and it exploded and became locked doors around this mansion, that's like generally the kind of puzzles that you're doing. There's a lot of different types of stuff going on, but generally they're very simple. And when I started to think about like, okay, we have this eccentric artist who's on this mission, like this singular purpose to create this perfect art, this grand masterpiece. But what I'm doing is I'm doing math puzzles as I'm going through this particular section, trying to marry those two in my head. And I just like couldn't make it work and was kind of distracted by that for a while. I will say, I think that it comes together. Like, I think there is a satisfying answer for that, but it was part of my experience trying to marry all this stuff together. I don't know if you had that at all.
I think, I love math, so any opportunity to do math puzzles does not slide off my brain. I'm absorbing it like a sponge, or like a human math sponge. Yeah, exactly. Right. I love doing numbers. I don't know what it is. And it's great here because like that's all easy stuff. And you're like at most adding the same 3 years together. Spoiler.
Right. Yeah.
But it's all that sort of stuff. But I hadn't considered that perspective on it, that it is largely an experience that's supposed to be so grandiose and yet is so simple, really. Most of the puzzles, the actual work and I think this is actually the distinction. The work of finding the answer is fairly easy. The challenge is inputting the answer. It's working with the very, very, like, every puzzle box feels like it has a totally, I mean, there's the number locks, but for the most part, the puzzles are they're solved in very different ways. You like have to hit buttons multiple times. What is this shape? Sometimes you know what the answer is. It's 4 digits. And the thing in front of you is like Tetris blocks, and you have to solve the puzzle. And you're like, in what world would that make any sense? That's the challenge of the puzzles in this game. It's like almost like the solving the number part in this construction of a maze that is the game, but also the literal maze within the world of it. Almost like finding those numerical answers is trying to tell someone something, and then inputting it is the hard part. Advancing is the hard part. Which I think is an interesting clash between Lorelei's perspective on creating art and her puzzle box nature and the way that she sort of came up in that world of making puzzles and making things more challenging. And then Renzo's world where everything is so important all of the time, but he can't see the minutia. He can't break down and notice the individual person and the way that they may experience the things that he makes or that other people make. He's just so focused on fame and fortune.
Mm-hmm. It's an interesting perspective that you have there too. Like, I was thinking of Renzo's big vision while I was going through here, but Lorelei's puzzles are part of the game too, and hers are much simpler. We'll say, like, much simpler kind of designs for each one, or the exhibits that you'll see throughout the the art exhibits that you'll see throughout the hotel are. Well, they're kind of like what you would actually see, like if someone had turned a kind of puzzle type thing into an art exhibit, where you're meant to look at it and kind of puzzle out, like, how does this work in the first place? That's kind of what you're looking at in this game from time to time. So I get that for sure. And I had like brought this up with some other people, and one of the big majority opinions that I heard was like, I was just doing puzzles as I went through, which is cool. But as I was playing, I was like, well, this game like very obviously has things to say about art. It won't stop talking about these things. So where do these come together? And then I eventually did get there, but that's something for later, for sure. You brought up the different kinds of puzzles, which I think is great in here. How many different types of puzzle solvers this game appeals to, and it's a wonderful game to play with somebody. Even if you just take puzzles that you don't know and just show somebody wherever you can, just be like, what do you make of this? Like it's that kind of game. Cause my wife doesn't play video games, but I got her to help with some of the puzzles because she just like, she's an artist. That's who she is. So she has this visual, skill. She can look at something and see the little visual things in a way that I can't. And there's a lot of puzzles like that where it's like, you need to look at this and like, from the way that this looks visually, you need to pick out what's important. And I can't. But she's like, let me get in graphic design mode and I'll tell you exactly what's important in this thing. And so it's great to share with people. And it's a great game to play with a notebook, like a physical notebook. Yes. And I wonder if, I don't remember. Does the game actually tell you that you should have a notebook? Because
in the in-universe instruction booklet, which is
that's right.
So funny that it's straight up Simogo's instruction booklet in the game that the character collects is like, hey, here's how you play the game you're about to play. They do suggest, getting out a notebook, because I have one. I didn't use a paper notebook, but I did have my iPad with me with my Apple Pencil. Shout out to Apple. And I was just, it's so funny because we were talking about it on the No Clip podcast. I was saying I could show you the notebook, and I'm sure you have a similar experience. I could show the notebook for Lorelei and the Laser Eye that I have, and it wouldn't be a spoiler because it looks like I'm Jim Carrey in the number 23 and I'm losing my goddamn mind. Like it doesn't, it's inscrutable, the information on those pages.
Yep. Number one, everyone's notebook, unless you're the most organized person that's ever lived, everyone's notebook is going to look like the ramblings of like the next Unabomber or something like that. Or it's also not going to be helpful because puzzle solutions are randomized in the game. So you can't just like type in what's the code to this because things are randomized or they're shuffled between like many different possible solutions. So you do actually have to like figure it out. It's a good thing about if you're stuck, the guides for Lorelei and the Laser Eyes, and shout out to all the guides writers out there, are all like, here's the concept of the puzzle.
Yep.
With that little hint, now you can figure it out, which is great. So lots of different types of stuff to be doing as you're going around in the mansion. The game is built on this one button design type of thing too. So as you're going around doing all the puzzles, the way you interact with them is all just with one button on your controller, or I assume mouse clicks. So it's never like complicated as to like, I need to do this weird sequence of events or like this timed thing. Like it's never presented like that either. So it's like, I think they're going for this really elegant, simple control scheme to have you just like intuitively know, okay, I have this thing in front of me. How do I interact with it? Well, it's the same button I use for everything. It's all simple. Yeah. This mostly worked for me, I would say.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask because I feel like there's so many complaints about the game when I was talking to people who were interested in it, maybe played the first hour. Actually, someone in the NoClip community made a mod for the game that allows you to press B to leave a menu.
It's my only complaint. It's the only one.
I completely understand it. Because it's a totally reasonable complaint. I'm playing on a controller with like 14 buttons, brother. Let me do one other thing. But I think there's something to the one-handed nature of it. It's a lot more accessible, especially like you said, for people who maybe don't play video games. It's still such a unique experience and something that will appeal to people who just like logic puzzles. And them not getting to play it because there's dexterity or remembering the control scheme, I don't think it's unfair. On the other hand, yeah, were there times where I was constantly hitting what I thought would be leave and I went back in a menu and then I'd go to X, but I didn't hit X, I hit the next thing. Like, yeah, that happened a lot, especially because you're constantly menuing in this game, trying to remember what's going on. And the very cool photographic memory system that Lorelei and the Laser Eyes has. Where you can sort of go back and check all your notes and different files that you found throughout the game. Everything's saved for you, so you don't have to like walk across the mansion to reread what something said. But unfortunately, again, like you said, because of the single button menu thing, it is a little, oh, okay, let me read through this book, and how do I get out? Oh yeah, I got to go to, and then what? And it's been 5 minutes and I'm stuck in the menu. So that was a little frustrating. Totally understand it. I wish they changed it, but it's not the end of the world. It wasn't so bad that I couldn't finish the game. You know what I mean?
Maybe they're tapping into their inner Renzo Nero and sticking with the artistic vision of the one button design. It's a minor thing. It comes up often. So it's like, you know, I'm going to talk about it as like a nitpick of the way you interact with the game, but it never causes you to fail anything. So it's not as bad as, it possibly could be. It's just not that kind of game. And it's something where like, I think you're onto something too, where you can bring in people who don't play games as long as they can, control a character with the stick or, WASD, I assume if you play with mouse and keyboard, like there's really not a whole lot of other interaction you have to do. You don't have to control the camera. You don't have to fight anything. Like it's not demanding in that way, for sure. It's demanding of your brain, for sure.
Thank goodness that's the only thing it's demanding of it. If they asked anything more of me, I would have turned it off.
How did you think about the overall like puzzle difficulty, we'll say? We said like they're kind of built on, at the very base level, pretty simple puzzles, but they do weave together in pretty complicated ways sometimes.
Yeah, that weaving was the thing that I found to be very exciting. I think is the word I would
Mm-hmm.
use. In fact, I also tried to play this with my wife and it didn't work out. She does not like logic puzzles and does not have a graphic designer brain. So she sees a bunch of shapes and cannot possibly tell me how those go together. But one night I was playing, I have it on Steam Deck, so I'm laying on the couch just fiddling around, writing stuff down on my iPad.
Mm-hmm.
And she's in the other room, and all she heard me yell was, "That's what that was for!" And I tried to explain it to her and she was like, "Stop. I cannot follow what you're talking about.
Uh-huh.
Glitches? What do you mean?"
You're
So
talking like a crazy person right
yeah,
now.
exactly. Couldn't possibly believe anything I just said. It was like a madman talking. But yeah, in terms of difficulty for the overall flow of everything, I totally agree that it was more about the way that things came together.
Yeah.
So much of this game is non-linear, not just in its direction of like storytelling and opportunities for puzzles, but also to the way information is given to you. The
Mm-hmm.
first time I played through, there was something I didn't solve. And it's one of the first puzzles you see. Like, I feel like
Mm.
very early on. I didn't solve until I had everything I needed to solve the next part of that puzzle. Which on the second playthrough, I was like, how the hell did I not solve that? It's on the whatever. So it's one
Yeah.
of those games where no matter how many times you play it, I feel like you can realize, oh, I could have just gotten this now, and that would have gone here and here. And
Mm-hmm.
actually, part of what I'm so curious to talk to you about, Dave, is the way that we moved through the puzzles of the game, which we'll get to in the spoiler section, I assume. But just
Yeah.
because there's so many different ways you can get to each of the sort of funnels for Lorelei.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I can't wait to talk about that.
Yeah. They're actually, I'd be interested to talk too, because when I was playing, it didn't feel like there were a lot of, choke points, as you said. Like, it didn't feel like, okay, I got the key item that unlocks. Like, obviously, some keys are more important than other keys, but I didn't feel that way as I was playing. It always felt like I was making slow, incremental progress in 3 separate directions. And then that would all stop. All 3 of them, I would hit dead ends. And then I would have to go back, kind of reassess, what did I pick up? Because all the notes that you pick up, everything is important for something. Even if it's very basic, everything you pick up is important for something. So it'd be like, I need to kind of reassess, what did I pick up? What doors do I have that are unlocked? What pins did I place earlier? Now I need to go around and see what else can I do. And there were definitely some puzzles that I just could not figure out for the longest time. And then, to the game's credit, once I either did figure them out or if I checked a guide, the answer was always something where I was like, I probably could have if I had, either taken a walk and come back, or if I had maybe if I had a different brain. But none of them seemed like weird esoteric things that don't make sense. Even like, okay, the guide says to do this, I guess I'll type it in. It doesn't make sense. I never got that feeling, to the game's credit.
So yeah, and that I think again is such a big part of what makes this so special. Is it's a game that is so focused on making puzzles that yeah, you can totally literally walk away from and give yourself some time, or in the
Mhm.
game just walk away and do something completely different and still make tons of progress. Like I said, that puzzle that I didn't solve early on required like 8 other things to be done, but it was such a simple puzzle and I hadn't solved it. So
Mhm.
there's so many different routes that I feel like I've noticed the second time around where I'm like, oh, I could have the first time just done all of this and solved all of it and never even realized what it was for until 8,
Mhm.
10 hours later. It's yeah, such a testament to the quality on offer here. Simogo, man, they make video games.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm very like I Sayonara Wild Hearts is awesome. So like I knew they had the juice, as the kids say, but I like after playing this, I'm like I have a much deeper respect for them, because they just clearly understand, even within a puzzle game, that puzzle games have to be so hard to make and like get people to the end of, especially if you're trying to tell a story. Like, you need people to slowly grok onto how your shit works.
Yeah.
And I think that overall they did a really good job. One other thing I wanted to commend them for is your puzzle solutions in the game are often found in loose pages that you pick up, like you said, script pages, journals, letters, posters, VHS tapes, whatever. Like they're scattered among what feels like hundreds of items that you pick up. But when I came across a new puzzle where I knew one of the solutions was going to be in that, I very often felt like I know where to look in these hundreds of pages that I've picked up.
Yeah.
I know what type of thing I need to go. I think I remember that in these script pages I looked up, for example. Like, it's got to be really hard because it would have felt way worse if it was like, oh, this random thing, you know. I guess what I want to say is when you pick up the thing, if you read the notes you pick up, the key information sticks out in a way where, like, the same way if you play a Metroidvania and you get the double jump, you remember those places you couldn't double jump to before. In Lorelei, when I came across a new puzzle, if I had already picked up the item that has the solution or the hint or whatever, I remembered that item. I remember reading something among, 55 other pieces of text I have. I remember where I should look for this. And I don't think that should go without praise. I think that's really, really hard to pull off.
Yeah, making things that are so distinct. Like, you're totally right. Like, I completely agree. So many puzzles throughout Lorelei where I was like, there's no way I could have remembered that if it wasn't such a distinct and specific pattern of characters or specific shapes I've been waiting to see this whole time. Like, they know exactly when to feed you, like I said, feed you information when they know the player needs it or it's unimportant for them to read an entire block of text. But they also know when to make something so distinct and obvious that once you reach this, like, eureka moment, it's not wasted. Like, the player doesn't experience that and go, all right, well, I'll let that slide off my brain until I need it. They're like, no, you're going to remember that in 6 hours when you need it, because it's the only time you've ever seen that shape, and it's so important. Yeah, you're totally right. That is a fantastic point. Thank you for making that.
Yeah. It's just a really, it's a really complicated game, but it's elegantly made along the way. It's the biggest ball of yarn of a puzzle game I think I've played in a long time.
And you get to the end of the ball of yarn and there's another ball of yarn.
Yeah.
How do they keep doing it?
Right. That's where some of the difficulty came in. The ultimate, like, iteration on how complicated these puzzles get, I could not figure it out. Until that point, I was, like, very good on, like, what was going on. And then even when I looked up the solutions to the endgame stuff, I saw the logic in it, but I was unsure if I would have figured it out. On a long enough timeline and with enough effort, I want to give myself the credit that I could have, but it was one of those where it was like, I wouldn't have figured that out, within the next couple days, I don't think. It reached a level where I think a lot of puzzle games reach for a lot of people, where there's like, I don't know what this is expecting of me anymore because it's gotten to such a complicated level. So did you ever hit a point like that?
There was one point. Yeah, I can't remember what it was specifically in my first playthrough, but there was a point where I said, I don't know what the hell's going on. And I'm like a capital G, capital C, I suppose. I'm paid for it. Game critic. I should go and, like, finish this so I can talk about it. And then I had that experience. I played very early on. I think I played like a day or two after it launched. So there weren't exactly guides, especially considering the fact, like you said, it's the puzzles are sort of randomized, so you can't really look up a guide. And there was nothing. I was like, even if I wanted to sort of skip past this, there's no information. So I had to just brute force my way through it. But yeah, I definitely remember at least 2 moments where I was like, there's no way. I'm pretty sure there's one puzzle that I solved that I straight up said, I don't even know what I did. Like, I was like, I don't know why but it opened. I'll take it. Which is good that there's not that many moments. I feel like some puzzle games, especially when they get longer in the tooth, like Lorelei is a little bit more content heavy, can sort of run into that problem of having so many puzzles that can feel like you're sort of just brute forcing them eventually, because the first 2/3. I don't really think I ever really maybe you did, but I definitely didn't feel like I ran into more than one moment where I felt like I just sort of solved it by process of elimination. I actually had to solve the puzzle, whatever it was.
Yeah. I was thinking back to like other long puzzle games I've played. I definitely hit a point in the first Talos Principle game where I was like, I have no fucking idea how to do any of this anymore. So it's like puzzle by puzzle guide because I want to see where the story goes.
Yeah.
Lorelei, like I said, I did go, I did have a guide open for a lot of like the last couple hours of the game, but that was because I had broken that barrier that I find it really hard for me personally to, once I've checked a guide in a puzzle game, I find it really hard to not go back to it at the first sign of friction on a future puzzle, you know?
Yeah.
So I did get to that point. But as I was going through some of those end game puzzles, I was like, yeah, this makes sense. This makes sense. Like it wasn't like in the Talos Principle where I literally had no idea what I was supposed to be doing with the updated mechanics as you get really late in that game. So still, like, it's, you know, the puzzles do get hard, but I don't think that it's like a flaw of the game that they get too hard or too esoteric or something like that. They still made sense even as I was just, you know, oh, that's what I do, you know?
Yeah. And one more thing I want to mention about the puzzles
Yeah.
and how I think they sort of deliver the information the player needs without being, well, actually they do get a little fourth wall breaky, which I think is good. And like I said, they have that Simogo instruction booklet at the start, but to their credit, when they give you a puzzle that requires information that the player may not have, and by that I mean information that is like common knowledge, quote unquote, right? Like common sense sort of information. Some of them are maybe you need to know how to read time on a clock. Like if, you know, younger people might not know how to do that because they read a lot of, I'm not going boomer mode, I swear. Kids really just, they know how to read digital clocks. They're not used to reading analog clocks. That's, I swear I'm not old. But that sort of thing. Or one of the really early ones is one of the first sort of funnels that you run into in Lorelei is a puzzle where you need to know Roman numerals. Now you could like Google it, right? But you don't have to. The information you need is in the game. In fact, you don't even have to solve what the Roman numerals are. Like they eventually they give you what you need to play that part of the game, which I think is very good. It's not one of those things where you need to outside of basic arithmetic, you don't really need to know any external information to solve it, which I really appreciated.
That's a good point, and that's a good accessibility thing, especially like when you get into people from different cultures that are probably going to be playing this game.
That's a really good point.
Where, like you said, Roman numerals, astrological signs, stuff like that. That's like common knowledge to you and me, but you know, not common knowledge to maybe someone who grew up in a culture that doesn't value the fucking zodiac or has a different zodiac. You know, so. All of that stuff is in notes that you pick up in the game, Greek letters, stuff like that, where stuff like it is a great idea that they were like, hey, we're just going to give you a little cheat sheet on this stuff for sure.
Literally a cheat sheet.
Also, the map is great. I want to shout out the map for just being really helpful for like, you'll get to a point where like this mansion is really big and it's complicated, lots of different connections between the floors. And so you'll get to a point, you know, halfway through the game where you've unlocked a good portion of the mansion and you may not remember by sight, like looking at the screen, have I been down that hallway? Have I explored every bit of that? But the map will let you know, doors you've opened versus doors you haven't opened, what types of keys they require, stuff like that. Really, really, appreciated in a space that's this complicated.
Yeah, and the maps, correct me if I'm wrong, but you get the map pages from the tubes, right?
Yeah, from puzzles. Yeah.
I guess this was a spoiler. Yeah, sorry.
They still have to open the tubes.
True. We didn't tell you how. So it's not information that you're handed. Like the game doesn't go, here's the layout of the floors. You have to work to get that information, or even the shortcuts in the maps themselves, right? The shortcuts require you sort of mentioned it. This game is like an exploded 150 of the hardest logic puzzles book where they've all been turned into locks. I mean, that's almost literally what's going on. So there's so much stuff like that in Lorelei where they're like, this game is not impossible to comprehend, but is the sort of thing where you don't need all of the information to play it, to solve it. Like, you don't need the shortcuts. You might, there might be a couple pages that you need from the map to sort of fully put it together, but you could play most of this game without solving like half of the literal logic puzzles that are in it, which I think is also pretty impressive.
Yeah, it is really good. So they abstract a bunch, but they give you all the key information that you need. For sure.
Exactly.
They really set you up to succeed. And then the rest is up to you. So it's just a really fun experience to play through this. And here, after this music break upcoming, we're going to talk about the aesthetics of it, which is just another like triumph of this game. So from a gameplay perspective, as you're going on trying to figure out what the hell's going on, what even is this place that I'm solving all these puzzles in, they have designed a really, really compelling game, really hard to stop playing. I would play this for hours each day.
Yeah, looks great, sounds great. We'll get into all that, but it is just one of those games. Yeah, it's hard to put down. It feels so good to do literally everything, even the frustrating menuing.
Mm-hmm. So let's take that music break. We will come back and we'll talk about the presentation in Lorelei and the Laser Eyes. As I said, Lorelei and the Laser Eyes, aesthetic triumph, visuals, music, sound, all of those things, just A+, as Sayonara Wild Hearts was. But I think the first thing that caught both of our eyes when we saw, the way the game looks is, the color palette and stuff that we're working here. It's all in black and white, except everything that's like highlighted or accented that they want you to see, or they really want you to be like, oh, that's crazy and cool and important, is this like reddish pink neon color. So immediately like striking the way it looks.
Yeah, like straight up just having the monochrome color style. I feel like there are a handful of games I've played that have done something like that. On Dawn, Year Walk, I guess to an extent, but just like that try to capture that look, but don't try to do too much with it in terms of directing the player visually. They just rely fully on their ability to use contrast to make things look great. And they do a good job of it. Like, I'm not trying to knock those games for using their look the way that they do. But Lorelei here, like you said, drawing the player's attention with that bright pink or purple, up to you. Am I colorblind? Maybe. What color is this shirt? Orange? But like that look, when they use it to direct the player, it's funny you mentioned that it's sort of a gameplay thing of like leading the player, because it's not always. Sometimes it's just messing with you, which I think is so great. Because when I saw this the first time, I was like, oh, it's doing that sort of like Schindler's List. Here's the girl with the red jacket sort of thing, right? Like draws your attention, immediately pops, makes it feel important. But in Lorelei, like, yeah, they're fucking with the player a lot. Like they are like, yeah, I mean, go here if you want. It might be something cool visually, but for the most part, it might just be nothing. It's half the fun is you being lost. And if they just did the Mirror's Edge thing of like highlighting everything red, I feel like that would have been a disservice to their ability to make great puzzles. And they didn't do that to themselves. They could have. It would have been a great crutch. Some executive at EA would have told them to do that probably. But you know what? They're smarter than that.
Yeah, it is not. You're right. It's not just a neon pink paint situation.
They do the internet would have gone crazy for that too.
They do highlight interactable stuff. So like I was going to say, despite the very limited color palette, it's always clear what you can interact with. Like, I think the more times that I missed things were because sometimes the camera angle changes within rooms. And so if you don't go into the spot where the camera angle changes, you're not going to see that thing sitting on the church pew or something like that. But it's still a very clear game as far as like what you need to interact with. And then sometimes, like you said, there's a trail of this glowing pink blood on the floor. I bet that's important. It's not really. Like, it's not going to lead you to treasure or anything. It's just blood. Also, cool visual thing. So there's like a CRT-ish filter over the game, and especially in the menus, you'll see it. But there's also there's like a film grain filter, and there's like this other weird, I don't know how to describe it other than splotchy filter over top of all of that. So there's like a lot going on with the way the game looks, despite it having such a limited color palette. Like, despite that, very impressive artistic way that this looks. It's very cool. Like, I just imagine them trying out all these different shaders to put over the top of it to make it look weird and cool. And it looks weird and cool.
Yeah, or even overlaying. There's like what do you call it? Is it superimposition? That's not a word? They superimpose.
That's a word. Yeah.
Is it? Let's go.
They're both words.
He's doing it. But like they superimpose pictures of like the wall or the outside of a building or something onto the scene that you're looking at. So if the camera's fixed in one angle, you could still sort of get a sense of where you are in the mansion, which I think is a really cool, very subtle thing. It's not like something that jumps out at the player, but even something so simple as that to give you some spatial understanding of where you are, to sort of feed into the player's like subconscious almost, especially when you're staring at these screens for so long. There's so much of this where, especially again for a game that you are often just standing there thinking about whatever the hell you were just doing. Making that look visually interesting while staying true to their monochromatic with like a pop of color, one color, must have been a serious challenge. I can't even imagine designing so many things that are so hard to comprehend with such a limited palette, because they were working from the beginning with like the one button design, the single or the monochromatic palette. I think specifically because Sayonara Wild Hearts was so bright and colorful, they were like, nah, let's scale it back. I'm reeling it in.
Yeah. Not like the artists. I was going to say all the artists take a break, but that's not what happened, because it's still really striking. It's just very different, the way it looks. I think the music is fucking great too. Really good. Music. 3 people I found have credits: Jonathan Eng, Linea Olsson, Daniel Olsson. Different spellings on the 2 Olsons there, but it looks like a collaborative project for the soundtrack. There's a lot of different moods to the soundtrack as well. They're all vibey as hell though. That's the one word I landed on for the soundtrack.
Very vibey, very like Twin Peaksy sort of soundscape. Reminded me a lot of that, the soundtrack for that. I listen to it while I'm working. The soundtrack for Lorelei and the Laser Eyes. Say that 5 times fast, folks. It's hard. It's just, it's got that sort of sound that every room feels different. Like there's a coffee room at a certain point that has a very specific sound to it. It's got like a soundscape where it feels like you're in a certain place, and there's basements that you go to that sound a certain way. It's like everything in Lorelei and the Laser Eyes feels so specifically designed, and the music is one of those things. It's not like they let it sort of just be whatever for the whole game. They could have very easily found 3 or 4 good songs and let them loop. Like it wouldn't have been a problem, especially considering how good some of the music is. But it plays into the art of the game. Yeah, for sure.
And especially considering how throughout most of the time when you're going through the mansion, like your normal rooms and hallways don't have music. It's just your footsteps. And then I loved this little touch, but like throughout there's, I don't know, 5 to 10 rooms that have record players in them, and you can turn on the music in there. And it's always like this kind of classical sounding music, but then you can like hear, if you go in the next room, you can hear it at like a lesser volume, and it becomes the soundtrack to different areas of the house or of the hotel as you're going through. But it's not like, it feels more diegetic. It's not like video gamey as hell, background. I mean, it's weird that your character would go through as you're doing the puzzles and be like, let me put a record on in here. But, it fits really, really well. So that stuff is great. I love the opening song. Main menu theme reminds me of like the X-Files theme in a way, kind of prepping you for that mystery vibe of, get your brain in that space of like, what the hell's going on in this place. Really, really love that. And it starts in with this like doot, 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 doot. And then it brings in these high vocals. And the vocals are used in a lot of songs. They sound like ghosts in a lot of the songs, lending to that kind of mysterious, is this mansion haunted type of, vibe to it. So really great, soundtrack. Anytime music comes in, it's really effective.
Yeah. That's storytelling from frame one too, right? Of like, like you're saying, you get that haunted sort of X-Files-y sort of vibe what are they trying to communicate to the player before you've even hit the start new game button? You know, what are they trying to tell you right away? And that follows through the whole way, where there's just constantly trying to tell you things with everything they're doing, from the music to the visuals and everything. Yeah.
Real quick shout out to the sound design also. Little like sound effects when you solve or fail a puzzle. It's really good feedback. And I started noticing this when I played Return of the Obra Dinn, and you get that little pat on the back sound effect when you get 3 of the crew people's fates right. And this game also has a great sound effect when you solve a puzzle. It's like, good job, Dave. You did it. I know it may have been tough, but you did it. So good job adding those numbers together, whatever that was.
Yeah, you did it. And then you input the thing right. And that too, I think, is also a very understated part of making the puzzles feel so good to solve, because so many of them you end up doing 8, 9, 14, let's not say what the number really is, times over and over again to solve them. So something like maybe there's a piano puzzle at some point, who's to say, hitting those notes and watching them play, or closing things, interacting with different buttons. Sometimes they have a very digital sound to them. Sometimes they have a crunchy sort of grinding sound where you could feel all of the little gears inside of something turning as you press a button or rotate it or click it. Everything sounds so satisfying in this like almost skeuomorphic kind of way, where you're like, I worked at an escape room, so being used to the sound of the dials on a lock and the way that they click is very, like, it's in my brain. I did it so much I don't even have to think about it for some of them. So when I hear them in Lorelei and I'm like, this is the solution to this puzzle, like that's how you put it together. That's how it all feels and sounds very correct. Like it's very impressive.
Very tactile, the way that, like very simple. You're using one button to do all this stuff, but it still feels like you're turning a combination lock or pressing little wooden buttons on a puzzle box and stuff like that, for sure. Real good. Oh, also, I really love the, there's a part in the game called the Quiz Club. No context, spoiler. Like, people don't know what the fuck that means. There's a part called the Quiz Club that has like this jazzy drum solo as you're going through it. And I just wanted to shout that out. It's so different from everything else in the game, but it's great. It reminded me of the movie Birdman, which is just...
Oh, yeah.
An
Iñárritu one?
What's that?
The Iñárritu directed Birdman, the one with Kevin...
The one with Michael Keaton as
Michael Keaton. I think I always go to say Kevin Conroy when I'm thinking of Michael Keaton.
There's too many Batman at this point.
That's what it is.
But yeah, it's like, that movie has like this entire movie long drum solo as the soundtrack to it. And that place has little, accents and drum fills and stuff as you, not necessarily as you do stuff, but as it feels like it as you're walking through, maybe figuring out how to interact with this place and stuff like that. So wanted to shout that out. It's really cool.
So well done. So much good music. You got a note here, not just Birdman, also Ape Out. That is a very good reference. Yeah, to pull for good that game as well. Yeah, great game.
Play that and do that on the podcast. I need a reason to beat that game. I love that game.
Yeah, if you're looking for an excuse, I think one of the Ape Out people is working on Baby Steps.
Ooh,
yeah, interesting. Coming out this year, maybe next year. So look out for that. There's your excuse.
Baby Steps. Very, very interesting group of talent working on Baby Steps for sure.
Yeah, that's Bennett Foddy too, right? I think is working on that. Yeah, that's going to be a real weirdo game. Can't wait.
Yes, it is. I can't wait. Yeah. So, anything else about presentation? Anything else we missed, we'll say, before we move on?
Yeah, I think there's some visual references that they make that are very specific, sometimes to other games, but also a lot of it is to classical French film and like silent movie era stuff. I'm not going to act like I'm some sort of big movie buff or anything, but I did take the time to watch last year at Marion Bad, which they've mentioned as a big inspiration for this game. And you could see it right away, the broken perspective, shattered mirrors, and the reflections that come along with that. Long hallways, this big sort of grandiose European design to everything, large courtyards. You can see a lot of the inspiration they pulled for that, which I think plays into Renzo Nero's character of being such a savant for film and yet such a like up his own ass kind of guy, where he like loses himself in his art and sort of becomes too inspired and perhaps forgets what makes it important. So it's cool to see that they pulled from an era of film that itself is so indulgent. I feel like people who tend to be a little too into that are like, it's so much better than Iron Man. And
Oh
it's like,
yeah,
man, it is better than Iron Man. We know that. I'm not watching Iron Man because it's film nouveau.
Yeah.
But it's still just really cool to go back and watch that, especially playing Lorelei first and going and watching Last Year at Marienbad and going like, oh, okay, I see so much of this has gone into it. Now I'm like, what other games do I need to go watch a movie to fully appreciate? Animal.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I gotta go watch. I don't know what you would watch for that. Nothing. There's no reference.
You need to go explore down your local sewers or something.
Yes, I need to go play an Atari 2600 adventure. That's what I need to play. That's what
yeah. No, it's I totally get what you mean. I can see what you're saying too from the very little silent film experience or black and white film that I've watched. But same type of thing. It's very cool to have played Deadly Premonition last year and then watch Twin Peaks for the first time and be like, oh, they didn't even try to make it their own. In some cases, they just took this shit, which is interesting to see. But
that's all the great artists, though, don't they? Isn't that the line? Great artists steal or whatever, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think Renzo Nero might appreciate that for sure. It's cool though. Cool the way they bring in so many influence. You can tell when you look at this, it's like it's so stylized. They're drawing from something here. So good to have that note from them of specific inspirations. Very cool.
Yeah. And the last thing I wanted to mention was the way that they present locks, puzzles, whatever, but also dialogue in the game is to sort of isolate everything in this floating black void where they become whatever they might be. If it's a character, if it's a lock or whatever, becomes the sole focus of the character and the player at that moment is like, that visually looks cool, but then the way that information is delivered, especially by other characters in the game, is so needlessly, much like the game, a puzzle in itself. It's like riddles on riddles. There's very little voice acting, not to say there's some like mumbling and grumbling in the background that's sort of impossible to parse. But the way that just everything is delivered to the player, whether it's text or storytelling or hints, the useless hints in this game, is all so whimsical. Feels like the wrong word, but it feels like you're playing a game in like murderous Willy Wonka's puzzle house sometimes with the other characters in the hotel with you.
The word that came to mind as you were describing that is, I was going to say dramatic. It might even be extra. Like the way that, specifically thinking about the way that cutscenes of dialogue, the way they're framed, like you never see a character's face like straight on talking to them. It's always like at some weird angle, or they have their back turned to you, but their head is turned so you can like see the profile of their face. It's very dramatic in that way, where like it throws you off because in the few times when you do actually talk to a person in this game, it's not very like personable and friendly when you're doing that. It's always like you are speaking to the master of the house about your progress through his grand puzzle design or whatever you think is going on in here. And he's very much like, oh, you'll get it one of these days, but he's got his back turned to you and maybe he has a gun pointed up in the air or something like that. It's just so, there's a flair for the dramatic. It might even be extra. I'm not sure.
Yeah, definitely seems to be one of those unnecessary artistic flares that someone like Renzo Nero might include.
Yeah, a game full of artistic flair. At the end of the non-spoiler section here, we always go through, if we have any like thoughts in summary, now's the time, but also what type of person do you think this game especially appeals to?
Ooh, that is a great question. I feel like it's got to be, if you like puzzles, any brand of them, logic, math, spatial, whatever, there's going to be something in here for you. And if you're already inclined to enjoy puzzles, the stuff that you don't normally like is usually straightforward enough that you'll still be able to get through and get to the next parts that you will really, really enjoy. And I think there's no shortage of good ones here. But even if you don't like puzzles, I feel like if you're willing to use a guide, this is also just a really good adventure game. Like, if you're like me, if you're like someone who plays Resident Evil and goes, I kind of wish there weren't zombies, this is kind of the game for you. Like, I like the weird puzzles in Resident Evil. I like the nonsense logic of like, yeah, the way that this scientist cures a disease is he fills up 3 different beakers with exactly the right amount of water. Like, for whatever reason, those are fun. And this game captures that feeling without the kind of annoying shooting the zombies part, which it's fine. I like the tension, but sometimes I just want to solve my dumb little puzzles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think, like, obviously if someone is a big fan of puzzle games, yes, play this. If you're a big fan of like strange games with artistic vision, yes, play this.
Yeah.
But I think that what you hit on again is this feeling that the game gives you of, it's the same feeling that you get in an early Resident Evil game or in a Metroidvania, where you know how to make progress and now you have a bunch of places to test out. Like, I have this new key, or I have this new knowledge about how this certain type of puzzle works. So I'm going to go try all of these places I got blocked before. And to me, that's like one of the purest forms of video game joy, is that feeling right there, where I got a new thing, or I learned a new thing, and I know where I can go use this, and I'm on the way and I'm skipping along the way and I'm having a good time. This game gives you that feeling for sure.
Yeah.
And since it's a puzzle game, I think that like combat challenges are easier to overcome than puzzle challenges for me personally. So because it's a puzzle game and there's no combat whatsoever, you can die, but we'll save that for the spoiler section. There's no combat. So you may need to look at a guide. If you got to be okay with that. Because I would hate for someone to just be like, well, I can't figure this out, and I'm morally opposed to checking a guide, so I'm never playing this again. Like, I think that would be a really shitty way to end your experience here. Because the last thing is, like, I think the payoff of all of this, once you see it and let it digest and like kind of formulate an idea of what you think it is, I think it's really cool. Like, it was worth it to go through that stuff. Yeah. But along the way, it wasn't like it's all payoff. Like, along the way, I got that sweet feeling that my favorite Metroidvanias give me, or, the Resident Evil remake that I love, going through the mansion with a new key, trying to remember like, yeah, this door, this door, this door, new places to explore. So gives you that feeling for sure.
Yeah.
Very good game.
Yeah. Great game. Oh, I hope they make another one like it, but given the way that their trajectory has been for development, there's not a chance in hell we get anything like this. Their next one will be an auto battler in space or something like.
Yeah, whatever the opposite of this is in every single design philosophy, be exactly the opposite.
So it'll just be Devil May Cry with the brightest colors you can imagine.
I can't wait. That'll be weird and cool too. I just have like I guess Simogo is up there with those indie developers where I'm just like, whatever they do next, I don't really even need to see a trailer or something. I'm just going to try it.
Super giant.
I have confidence.
Simogo. It's the S's, it feels like. They're really making it work. Yeah.
Yeah. So good hearty recommendations for the both of us to try this out. So before we get into spoilers, we have our housekeeping to do, and housekeeping always starts with the guest. And as I said at the top, Jesse, I think you primarily do your work with NoClip, whether it's working on their videos or being on the podcast there. But I know you do a ton of other stuff too. So feel free to shout out whatever you would like to of the many things that you do.
Thank you. Yeah, there's so much stuff. So mainly NoClip, like Dave said. If you want to check out what we do, the video game documentary channel that has done tons of documentaries over the last 8 years over some of your favorite games, Doom, Final Fantasy 14. Most recently, we've done ones on Legacy of Kain, Age of Empires, Vampire Survivors. We've done podcast episodes with the developers of Balatro and people from Alchemy Labs, Crush House, anything you can think of, from big to small, we cover it all. Wow, that's good. We should write that down.
That is a good line. Yeah.
I'm going to charge him for that. No, but yeah, working with Danny O'Dwyer has been an awesome experience for the last couple of years. So that's been great to do. And then on top of that, I work with tons of other cool people, especially I want to shout out Blowback. I've been working with them for the last couple of years on their documentary series for different wars that have been enacted imperialistically by the United States of America and other powers across the globe. So they have a great series of very informative and very hard to listen to, but incredibly valuable documentaries. And season 5 of that will be dropping at some point in the summer. So watch out for that. And if you haven't listened to the previous seasons, I cannot recommend them enough. I think season 3 is probably my favorite, but season 4, 2, and 1 are also really, really good.
Nice. You said that was Blowback?
Yeah, Blowback Pod, or blowback.show, I think is the website now. But
okay.
Yeah, check us out.
Cool. Yeah. Send me, those links. I'll make sure they're down in the show notes, along with what NoClip does. I feel like if people are like really big into this show, they already know about NoClip, but in case you don't, NoClip is, I feel like one of the OGs in like this independent video game documentary, type of, creator. There's several out there, and I feel like everyone does great work, but, a new NoClip like documentary is almost like an event. Like in my Discord server, people will drop it and be like, it's NoClip Day. And it's a thing that, people stop and take note of because it's great work. So I'll, easily recommend everyone go check that out. The podcast is also a lot of fun too. The Crewcast is a lot of fun, and you can hear Jesse on the show along with the other creators, other NoClip creators on the show there. It's a great time too. So you just got a great crew over there, and really recommend everything that y'all are doing. And Blowback sounds really interesting. I wasn't aware of that, but you're right. It does sound like it's important work, even if it may be a bit uncomfortable for some people.
Yeah, it's hard and heavy hitting, but it's especially right now with the way things are going in the States and the rest of the world, it's, I think, important to look back at history and say, this is the way things were going. And also thank you for your kind words for NoClip and the Crewcast. We've been doing the Crewcast now for about 3 years. Again, I started there, and that was the whole reason I came on, was to bring the podcast back to life. So we've been having a ton of fun talking about new games, random experiences, the behind the scenes of making the documentaries and what goes into the work, and just generally rambling about the industry, games, whatever. We have a great time. It's usually every Friday you'll get a new episode. So check it out. Subscribe, give us a 5-star review. Everything Dave's going to say about this show in a second, probably.
That's right. Yeah, for sure. I appreciate that, the smooth transition into the plugs at the end of the non-spoiler section here. But before I talk about myself, I will say I'll put everything down in the show notes that Jesse's doing. NoClip, Blowback, everything else that Jesse wants to put down there. So you don't have to remember these things. You can just go click. While I'm talking about myself, go find something. You'll find something you like there. So for this show, if you would like to support the show, the best ways to do that, if you're listening on the podcast apps, as we said, 5-star reviews, written reviews on Apple Podcasts, all that stuff, super helpful. It will help people find the show, and that's what we really want to happen. Same goes if you're watching on YouTube, for liking, leaving comments, subscribing, all of that. Again, we want people to find this. The algorithm is a motherfucker sometimes, so we need all the help that we can get. Also, you can join the Discord server if you would like to join a community of friendly folks who love talking about video games and all kinds of other stuff. If you played Lorelei and the Laser Eyes, you want to come talk about discoveries or especially story theories, as we're going to get into soon, why don't you join? We'd love to have you. Come on in, come chat. And finally, you can support monetarily. Patreon.com/RealDaveJackson is the place. $2 per month minimum. We'll get you voting rights on games I do on the show, some bonus episodes, and lots of other treats as the tiers increase there. So that's patreon.com/RealDaveJackson. And with that being said, let's take a music break. When we come back, it's going to be full spoiler time for Lorelei and the Laser Eyes. right, before we get to full spoiler time for Lorelei and the Laser Eyes, I have a couple of announcements and the customary thank yous. No guest appearances this week, however, there is some cool stuff going on over on the Patreon. The Tales from the Way backlog episode for this month is out. It is about Kirby's Dream Land. So if you want to know how I feel about Kirby's Dream Land, playing it for the first time, you can go check that out. That's available for $5 patrons. Next month is going to be about the original Star Fox, which I've also never played. There will also be a new poll going up, and in that poll, I will be letting the patrons pick from some of the indie darlings of 2025 thus far. As Lorelei and the Laser Eyes was one of those games from 2024, I'm trying to play some catch up for this year. So go check that out if that sounds good to you, patreon.com/realdavejackson. And speaking of Patreon, here are some fine folks who have done just that. Big thank you to Chris Nelson, the Top 3 Podcast crew, Zulgeek, Chris Copleen, Eric Guess, Rick Firestone, Nick Ficori, Jill, Soccer, Cupcake, Kyle, Christian S., Matt aka Stormageddon, JD, Doug Leaf, Jason Emery, Brian Skirsha, Jenny E., Marcus O'Neill, Stefan, Drellish, Rob Smith, Rigamort, Sil Canet, Ashton Ruby, Levi, John E., and many more. Thank you all so much for your support. It means a lot to me. It makes things possible, such as my recent trip to PAX East. And by the way, there was a bonus episode about PAX East on YouTube and on the podcast feed. So there's another thing you can check out. I've been busy. So with all that being said, thank you everybody, and let's get back to full spoiler time for Lorelei and the Laser Eyes. All right, we're back. Full spoiler time for Lorelei and the Laser Eyes, and the same disclaimer as always before we get into it. Proper. This is not a linear walk through the story, as if that would be even possible with this game, really. But we are going to spoil anything soon, so get out. Really, if you don't want spoilers, you're not safe anymore. This is a dangerous place. So. With that being said, I kind of want to just kick this off by talking about if there were any memorable sections of the game before we talk about the story, memorable puzzles, anything that really stumped you, or moments, triumphs, etc.
So I mentioned in the non-spoiler section about there being a moment where I realized something and I scared my wife in the other room who was confused. So that moment in particular is in regards to something that we might need to explain a little bit, but I'll try to do it in brief.
Sure.
The series of puzzles that takes place later in the game, depending on when you solve things,
right,
where you realize that these games that you can sort of get into, literally, like you walk around in these sort of prototype levels, you realize that there are rules for how those worlds work and the way that you interact with them, and sort of like force a user error or a glitch or a bug.
You're doing QA.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. This is what we were sort of talking before we hopped in about something I wanted to mention. I guess this is a good time to sort of introduce the idea. But that was the puzzle that made me go like, oh, holy shit, wife, Cassandra, I'm losing my mind. Because I can't believe that there's these glitches are how you get an answer to something I've been waiting to solve for like 5 hours. So that was a really very, very cool moment. But I think that sort of leads to my ultimate musing on this game, which we can talk about, I'm sure, multiple times throughout the spoiler section. Lorelei and the Laser Eyes is, to me, a game about the career of a game developer, the career of any artist, but very specifically a game developer, and almost one that feels autobiographical. I don't want to speak for the developers or anything, but you look at the pedigree of Simogo and their work over all these years, and the way that they're always doing something different, and it feels so singular, so artistically driven by people who have a specific style in mind, something that they're trying to do with this project. And you can see that represented throughout the entirety of Lorelei and the Laser Eyes, the different puzzles, the point and click moments where it turns into this like 1-bit monochromatic, retro point and click game. or even these glitchy sections where it turns into an almost PS1 low fidelity survival horror game for a little bit. Like there's so much inspiration here, but then also again the way that it reflects how they've made games, or even just the games industry, and the way that has evolved, especially given the time frame for this game of like mid 20th century, late 20th century time frame is very I love thinking about that and the way that it reflects so many things, especially as we've watched, especially growing up with the industry, but also watching the industry change from a more direct perspective, talking to developers over the last 3-4 years.
Yeah, it's a really cool thing how you don't have to be that much older than us, than me specifically. I mean, I don't know, but you don't have to be that much older than us to have grown up alongside gaming in its like mainstream form, right? To be there for all of the major eras when video games were like big commercial things that you could just go buy and take it home, play in your house and stuff like that. So seeing like the kind of evolution of, I didn't clock that, the different styles of like that adventure game and then the PS1 debug mode, all of those things could be like, it could be like someone who spent their life in game development, or maybe even just like someone who's, now in game development, but remembering the stuff they grew up playing, etc., all their influences and stuff, and how that can tie in with, like I said, this game has like big ideas about art and its intersection with capitalism and its intersection with its audience and things like that. Game developers would have feelings about that stuff too. I mean, it's pretty easy to see how you can see how Renzo Nero views everything in Lorelei and the Laser Eyes, but it's easy to see how like you could maybe remove some of the madness from Nero and be like, the creators of this game probably share some of these ideas, some of these feelings, especially when it comes to how money and funding intersects with art as it, pertains to video games specifically, and how just like fucked up the industry has become, more so recently because of, when big money gets involved and that has big expectations of what video games are supposed to be, etc. And then you could look at it from like the other side of that, Simogo, the indie team, who is, I don't want to assume, but I will assume at some point they had to fight and claw to get funding, publishing for their games, unless they were very lucky right from the beginning. But there's a storyline in this game. What I feel like sends Nero on this path of fucking obsessive madness is his movies stop getting funded because people don't like them or they don't hit the right audience, etc. And I feel like that's relatable for anyone who's in like a creative artistic field, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you can see it, I feel like, especially for Simogo in this particular instance, because Annapurna Interactive published this game. And if you've been following the story of that publisher for the last year, they haven't had a particularly positive time. They've had fallouts with their staff, people leaving en masse. So there's already so many question marks surrounding even their next collaboration if Simogo chooses to work with Annapurna. But they recently announced, and I think this is to your point of like the funding and the sort of needing to make choices that perhaps are more financially viable and less artistic, is like they've gone back and done an update for Sayonara Wild Hearts that'll be launching, I think, in the next couple months for the PS5 version of the game. I don't know if it's for all versions, but that'll have a big update for it that adds more stuff. And like, that's cool. That's good. But like, how much of that was them finishing it? Maybe that was all of it. I'm not really sure. I don't know the relationship, but like the rocky waters that exist, even in what seems like a pretty strong relationship between these two entities, is like still up in the air. It's so impossible to know whether or not things are going to work out for them and what things will look like. I mean, 3 weeks ago, if you asked me if Monolith Productions was going to be closed, I wouldn't have said yes to that. And yet here we are, right? The shape of the industry is constantly changing, and the shape of all artistic industries is constantly changing. And that has never changed. That has never become anything other than a constant for any artist. Renzo and Lorelei are just two figures in a constantly shifting landscape that somehow has persisted since probably the beginning of the commodification of art. Like selling, you could make Lorelei and the Laser Eyes about fucking people who made cave paintings or whatever, like, you know,
Yeah.
tens of thousands of years ago. There's always going to be this conflict between the desire to be a pure artist who loves their craft and does it because they want to improve, and the people who do it because they want to be successful and they want to fund their concepts, whether or not they may be viable or whether or not they may be self-indulgent. They're always hunting for that opportunity. It's such an interesting dichotomy between these two characters. But then also, like you said, the reflection and contrasting of these two characters, like they are not a black and white. They are like two shades of the same color and in constant opposition. It's such an interesting, again, for a game that is so monochromatic, whoa, it's got layers. They do this great back and forth between these two seemingly opposing and yet two sides of the same coin kind of perspectives.
Yeah. It's interesting. Like, I think from my point of view as a critic and like my greater circle as people who love video games, I think that people want artists like, you know, obviously this is pipe dream, this is perfect world type stuff, but people want artists like Renzo who are in it for purely the art. They're making the art that they want to make. Audience be damned, funding be damned, commercial success be damned, which is obviously not a reality for anyone who's trying to make a living out of the things that they make. But it starts with that. You know, I feel like anyone, especially in the world of video game development, I feel like this is an industry that would just crush the creators out there who start with impure motivations, we'll say. Like, you have to be in it because you fucking love making video games. Otherwise, it's just going to destroy you.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, that's part of the grift. That's the only reason it works, is because they abuse people who are in it because they love doing it. If you didn't, then you would get it. If you didn't love making video games, you'd be getting abused for nothing, basically.
Right. Exactly. And so I forgot where I was going with that, but like, it starts with that pure artistic spark. That's where it was. Yeah. And that's where Renzo is one of these types of people who never relinquishes that spark when funding dries up. And I like how in the game, they're never quite clear on if his movies are good. It doesn't really matter if his movies are good.
I think it's implied. Lorelei says something in some documentation where it's sort of implied that, that she thinks it's shit. And does that mean is there such thing as objective good or bad? But like I'm like almost I'm interested in her perspective on this artist's stuff. So I'm going to trust her if she says it's bad. I think he seems like one of those guys who probably kind of sucks a little bit, but everyone says it's good.
Right. It could be one of those things where it's like it could just be like genuinely shitty things. And he's like, no, I'm making this great art. None of you understand. But it could just be like this artist that makes cult classics, and cult classics don't provide future funding because, maybe the people didn't catch on or something like that. I mean, he obviously had money at some point, wherever that came from. But the thing was, like, Lorelei thought that the one movie sucked. She hated it, but she was drawn to him as an artist, and she respected like the vision or something. There was something magnetic there. And so, like, what I think is cool is he never relinquishes that artistic spark. It drives him to madness because he then disregards any thought for how people will take in anything that he makes. And he just becomes obsessed with making like these perfect works of art, which that's probably something that's not real. So he just goes crazy, driving himself to this point. And then, we get into the partnership with Lorelei and what actually happens in the story. But like it starts, I think, in a really noble place, in the same way that I think a lot of people start in any artistic field, where they get into it not because like, I want to be a rich and famous filmmaker. Like, unless you start with a silver spoon, I feel like a lot of people are just like, I'm making these weird student projects because I like filming, I like making movies, or I like painting, or I like making these weird little indie games. I love when I see like established game developers, and then you find out they have an itch page with like 75 fucking little games that nobody's ever played on there.
Yeah.
Because they just love making video games, and they always have. And that's kind of where Renzo starts before he loses his mind in here. And I just really like that. I like that that's like one thing that this game reminds us of, is that anyone who gets to that level, most people probably started with this, and then Renzo just took this weird path after that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like everyone, especially game developers, maybe not more than most other artists, but in a very similar way, have that backlog of wasted's maybe not the right word, but like just lost projects on their hard drive that have gone nowhere, that, you know, are prototypes or very finished products that just never went out there because it wasn't good enough, or it was a fun experiment but it wasn't meant to be seen to the world. Like my coworker Jeremy Jane, the lead editor and cinematographer for NoClip, he has been working on video games for the last year or two now, a lot of his own little indie projects, and he'll tell me the coolest thing I've ever heard, like something I would absolutely spend $15 on and be obsessed with for a weekend. And he's like, yeah, I don't know, I just put it on a USB drive and threw it in the ocean. And I'm like, not literally, but I'm like, what are you doing, man? Make the $10. And I'm like, oh no, I'm doing it. I'm making him commodify his art.
Well, that's where this goes too. Yeah, I remember like Terry Kavanagh just released a collection of like weird
his own real UFO 50.
Yeah, exactly. He released that. Like Lucas Pope every now and then will just come out with like a weird little itch game for free or something like that.
Mars
like
from Midnight or whatever too.
Love
Playdate.
Yeah, like the little the Playdate game, or like there was an itch game that was like an old like Tiger Electronics game that was really cool. That was just like, made this weird little thing. It's not a commercial product. Have fun with it. So it's like I love where this kind of starts, and then the clash happens in Lorelei and the Laser Eyes, where like Renzo starts to get less and less, I guess, acclaim, and then with acclaim comes with funding for future projects, until it's finally like, no, we're not funding this next movie. Like we're finished with you. And that kind of sends him on this path to, he enlists the help of Lorelei because he likes her art, and she's kind of drawn to him to make this like very amorphous final masterpiece or whatever. It was never even clear to me like what they were working on before the computer got involved. Then it became like Renzo sees the potential of the computer as a new medium for art and becomes obsessed with its like capabilities, we'll say. But it was like almost like you at the beginning of the game coming in, not knowing why you're going to this mansion. It was like really unclear, like, what are they working on before the computer gets involved?
Yeah, in what ways were they able to express the artistic intention of this project when they didn't have the computers? Because Lorelei's whole thing is like, what she like made a sculpture of her father, right, in 3D, like very early 3D, without the tech that would become so ubiquitous. So it's like just thinking about that sort of stuff where she clearly has been approaching this kind of artistic expression with the computers, with all of this digital technology, getting to that point, but she was already there. You know, the thing that Lorenzo is sort of chasing now and becomes so obsessed with is the thing, or sorry, Renzo. I guess we're in the spoiler section, so it's fine. I can mess up those names. But that's the thing that Lorelei ends up getting to that point for her was like, I was already there 20 years ago, man. You're obsessed with the thing that I was doing in my head. I think that's so cool. The way that sort of evolved outwards. But Dave, I was curious because you asked me at the start and then we went on this very interesting tangent. Was there anything puzzle or narrative wise that popped out to you as a very memorable moment?
Sure. Yeah. As far as like puzzle stuff, I had a moment. And it was kind of a letdown, but it was kind of like a letdown because I built expectations up too high. When I finally figured out how the shortcut doors worked, I was like, I'm gonna unlock this entire house. Finally, this is the breakthrough I've been waiting for. In it, like they kind of like bar you from getting places you shouldn't get to until you're supposed to be there. So it wasn't the big like big unfolding of the house the way I thought it would be, but it was still a cool moment to be like, I know how these work. Like I had a breakthrough of like, oh, the name on the thing, because his name is Bolt, the guy who made the puzzle book. So it was like, oh, the bolt lock says Bolt because it's a deadbolt. Like, of course, that makes sense to me. That simple connection of like, oh, I picked up a book of puzzles written by Dr. Bolt or whatever the name is. I didn't make that connection until like, I don't know, 10 plus hours into the game.
Oh, man.
So finally having that breakthrough and then just like rolling around the house, just unlocking all the doors and then finding like, I actually didn't unlock many places I hadn't been before. It was still a great moment, a bit of a letdown, but just because I was like, oh, it's going to break the game open. It's not going to break the game open. So that was a moment for sure. The hardest puzzle for me was, I should say, before I say the hardest one, the one that I'm most proud of figuring out is the relationship between the quiz club, the third person maze, like, behind the shoulder maze, and the maze that you get to through the broken mirror. Like I figured that out. That felt awesome to figure out, of like, I'm going to take a chance by picking up these things and breaking these things so I can't fucking see anymore. I hope this pays off. And it paid off exactly the way I thought it would pay off.
Yep.
And I love that.
Such a good culmination there, yeah. Because you find that maze so early on, that like top-down mirror reflection kind of maze. You find that so early, and it's like, what does anything ever mean? But that in particular is a real moment of like, what the hell is going on? So yeah, that's definitely one of those bits where it clicks, and you're like, wow, holy shit, this game, man, what the hell? So yeah, the one for me that made me go like, oh, holy, that's what that says, was really early on. I mentioned there was a puzzle that I didn't solve, and it took me forever. When you walk into the gallery for the first time before you go into the backyard with all the horses, there's that big statue of Renzo's head with a fucking thing on it that has R-E-N-Z and O on it. And I did not fucking, for the life of me, could not figure out that said Renzo until after I got all of the other puzzle boxes that are in the room when you solve that puzzle. I got every other puzzle box. I got the solution, for every other puzzle box before getting into that room. And then I got into that room, and I was like, unbelievable. I just spent forever getting answers to something I had no concept of, and I never figured out that stupid puzzle at the beginning of the game was the name of the guy that I've read 100 times. So stupid. So fun, though.
Dude, there's so many puzzles in the game that like, I think there's going to be one of those for everybody where you're just like, you don't see it. And it's because you're looking other places. This game is full of stuff like that where like the solution's actually right in front of you, but you're looking so hard for the solution that you miss it. So I definitely had some stuff like that too. Some of those rooms where you get the solutions for the puzzle boxes with like the projectors and stuff like that. I had a couple of those where I looked up the answers and I was like, oh, dude, that is the easiest puzzle that's ever been made. What are you doing here? So definitely some of those.
I wanted to mention, by the way, with the posters, there's like a bunch of movie posters that you find, not the ones that are for the, or actually, I don't think they're movie posters. I think they're for Lorenzo, the magician.
Right.
They have the paint on
ones
them,
that
right?
are cut up.
Yes. The first time, and please tell me you did this too, and it's not just me and I'm stupid. The first time I did those puzzles, I did not realize you could reorganize them in the game. So I went into Photoshop and was like moving the pieces around in Photoshop to get the... Was that just me?
Well, I can't use Photoshop, so I didn't do that.
Okay.
It might just be you.
Damn.
This would be a reason someone let us know. Comfort Jesse, tell him it wasn't just him.
Please.
But no, I think I figured that out. There were a bunch of things that I like wrote down in my notebook and I was like, oh, I got this solved. I'm going to figure this out. And it, like, my notes were not helpful at all for what those things actually required. The biggest example being what you end up using those posters for, the computer. I could not figure out the computer. The computer was the thing that drove me to the guide where I was like, I know what these symbols are. I know where they are in the game. I do not know what and like the last computer thing is like years with 3 little notches and you're supposed to slide I was like, I've seen these years hundreds of times throughout the game. What does it want from me? What specific one does it want? That was the thing that drove me to the guide, was I couldn't figure out the computer.
One of the solutions for that computer, correct me if I'm wrong again, there's like a bit where you talk to Lorelei and you get a bunch of patterns that turn out to be numbers, right?
Yeah.
Figuring that out was like, what are you talking about? I went through every single one of them, and then I had that moment where it clicked and I was like, oh, wait a second, that's a 1, that's a 9, wait a damn second. And I just put it all together and I was like, yeah, I felt like a smarty pants, even though it took me probably an hour of staring at them to figure it out.
I needed a guide for those two, is part of the computer, because the computer is like, it's a step up from basically everything else. The computer puzzles require extra steps. And it is funny, though. I did solve some puzzles throughout the game by either trying 1963 or 2014 or the other important years, just be like, oh, it's a 4-digit number, let me just pop in 1963. Or there was the ones where you see Lorenzo and he's locked up and you have to put in words in the combination lock. I was like, well, here's the same number of letters as his name. I'm just going to type in Lorenzo. Whoop, it worked. Yep. What do you know? Yeah.
That is, I think, part of the fun. Like I was saying, with the dates and everything, it's on the second playthrough, I sort of came to the realization that every single puzzle is just, one of those years or a word that you already know. So it's not so much a game about solving necessarily. It is the first time through, or at least it was for me. But it was definitely a lot more of a game of figuring out how those pieces go together, more than it was finding the pieces, which is not unlike Resident Evil, a game series where you're just finding keys and opening doors. So very, it's just funny, man. Just funny thinking back on like, you could totally brute force so much of this game if you just go 1986 to 2014. It's so funny.
You could try. In reality, I don't think it will get you very far, but on individual puzzles, it's worth a try. So definitely did that sometimes. Speaking of things that we figured out or didn't figure out, at what point, maybe even after you finished the game, at what point did you have an idea of what happened in the story?
After I finished the game and then thought about it for a couple days and then talked to some other people who beat it. Yeah, the story for this game, even when you finish it, I feel like doesn't fully answer everything. Not even like in a way where you may want all of the stuff answered. It doesn't answer everything, like, period. It gives you a couple of good things of like, these two names are the same person. And it's like, I hope you put that one together because most of this guy's name is in this guy's name. Like, that overlap was really interesting. But like, I was like, who are the guys in the suits with the mazes? Are they supposed to be somebody who is, and then you figure out, oh, this is who Lorelei is. And it's like, okay, at the end, it's not explicitly stated, but you're playing as Lorelei, right?
Yeah. That's what I thought. And credit to people in my Discord server who I finished the game and I went in and I was like, what the fuck happened? And some people were like, here's what I think happened. I was like, that makes a lot of sense. That's now my own original idea. So, I think it's pretty clear you're playing as Lorelei in her deathbed, walking around a mansion made up of her memories and possible traumas, right?
Yes.
So that's what I think is happening. I think we can agree on that.
What's the key trauma?
Yeah. So the key trauma being that what's in the last cutscene, that Renzo, is it Lorenzo in real life or Renzo?
I think it's Lorenzo is his real name.
Yeah. And her name was Lorelei, but there's another woman named Renate.
Yeah, Renata or something like that.
Yeah,
right?
Renata. I don't know how to pronounce it, and I don't know who they are.
Yeah,
so,
I don't remember if that's clarified at any point. Maybe I think it might be somebody who's who worked with Lorenzo before Lorelei did. I think
I thought it was maybe an alias for Lorelei, but
maybe.
who knows? Anyway, Lorelei, after Lorenzo went crazy and was like waving a gun at her, pushed him out of a window and killed him in self-defense. And what was unclear to me was, did Lorenzo want her to do this? Because I think this is his final piece of art that he's trying to make, because it's in the script. It's in one of the scripts. It's the lost script pages, I think. If you read all of those, it's exactly the same events. And it's the same events that play in those weird little interrogation room scenes when the floating guy catches you and you have to do those puzzles where it's like, how many cups were on the table?
Right. Yes. Yeah.
And do those puzzles. That's playing you through the events of the real story as well. It's like you get that story in two separate ways, and then the ending matches to what I think happened in real life.
Yeah, that feels right. I feel like there's so much in the way that the story's told that even those explicit moments could still be interpreted in different ways to mean different things. Maybe not be literal, maybe be hyper literal, and like you're supposed to take it as scripture. Yeah, so it's so good. And the fact that the story is concluded in the way that it is, where you're playing through this like memory maze for Lorelei, such a good representation of that sort of thing in the final hours of such a confusing video game.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, so there's a couple levels to that. Then, if we're going with this, that it's Lorelei on her deathbed processing the most important events in her life, maybe the most important event in her life. So as you're going through the house, then the puzzles and the mazes would represent difficulties in remembering or putting pieces together or something like that. That's the thing where, like, as I was playing the game, I was like, this game has big statements about art and, he's trying to make this big masterpiece. Why the fuck am I adding 1963 and 2014 together? How does that match? But then with this interpretation of the story, that's what that is. That you're not working through Renzo's masterpiece. You're working through Lorelei's memory.
Yes.
And overcoming obstacles and blocks and things like that. And I think that a puzzle is a weird representation of something like that. Like a number puzzle is a weird representation of a trauma, if that's what it is. Again, open to interpretation. The game doesn't say that that's what it is.
Well, the way that I see it is like Lorelei's whole thing growing up is she loves making puzzle books, right? She loves working on puzzles, logic puzzles, whatever kind. So the laser eyes that she has, like the way that she sees the world is in these puzzles, is in these games, is the way that she sees everything, whether it's a person or a moment or her own trauma, the way that she compartmentalizes it. Again, all up to interpretation, but just the way that I see it is like she compartmentalizes her own trauma and issues and whatever it might be, her memory of these scenarios, whether it's honest or not. She sees it in these very simple, but also very, for her, contrived and impossible to follow the route of in terms of timelines, moments in her life. And she goes, these need to be packaged in such a way that only I could figure them out, but also in a way that I feel I could like connect to. And for her, that's the thing that she's done her whole life, which is make puzzles. And it's, I think, beautiful that in her final moments, she gets to solve her own problems, literally and metaphorically. I think that's a very beautiful way of doing that.
That's, that's a psychological horror thing. I mean, my experience, right? So I play a lot of psychological horror games, and that's the cool thing about them is you take a psyche or a way of experiencing the world, and that becomes the real world that you interact with. And so that makes sense that if this is how she sees the world or just this thing that she likes making, then if you're going through this representation of her mind and memories and this big swirl of confusing events and names and timelines and stuff, because who the fuck knows what's going through your head as you're on your deathbed, Yeah. So if that's what it is, then the way that it takes form is in the things that she's most familiar with. And that makes a lot of sense to me, for sure. And then you get to the computer part at the end, when you get into her her newer passion, I would say, after puzzle boxes and stuff. This final hurdle takes the place of going through this computer, these weird little blocks of data or whatever that you have to manipulate and provide the right answers to. But it also kind of shows there's a representation that you see around of like the brain is a computer. And so this is just a representation as an actual computer as you make that final realization.
Yeah, and I think the motif of computers throughout the whole game is really well done, because like they're obviously the save points for how Lorelei just does saves. It's not like you go to a save room. Although, man, could you imagine the save room music? It would have been so good. But the computers being all over the house, I think, isn't just a representation of like this is where you go to save on a mechanical layer. I think it was also like her, whether or not this mansion or hotel is even remotely representative of a real place. I don't think it is personally, but I could see it. If it's supposed to be, having all those computers around for her character and for Renzo or Lorenzo's character would make a lot of sense. They're so attached to their work that they would be carrying it in floppy disks on them wherever they are in the house. And when the moment strikes, when they have a realization of some art that they could put or some new thing they could add, they'd want to be able to do that wherever they are in the most immediate like vicinity of them. So they would have computers all over the house. They would be the kind of people who need not a notebook to scribble on, but a device to do their work on anywhere that they possibly could. I thought that was really cool when I came to the realization that like, that's what this is supposed to be. It made the having those computers feel less rigid and more like part of the story, instead of just like, we got to make sure the player has a save point here, man, or they're not going to be able to, what if they die when they don't answer the right pop quiz, you know?
Oh yeah. I think you can also add on to that if you're thinking about it from the character's perspective, what is a save room? It's a safe place. It's a place they feel comfortable, right? And I would assume that Lorelei probably feels more comfortable with her head buried in front of the screen of a computer, doing her passion project and doing what she's best at. Anything else in the house, if you, even without the, Renzo's an abusive asshole at some point in their relationship. Even without that aspect of it, that's where she feels most comfortable, in front of the computer. So there is that. And then along the motif of computers that you brought up, if you add in, you had mentioned, video game development. And if we're looking at like this as maybe a video game developer's point of view, having the computer be seen as, Renzo calls it the rising sun of cinematic art. So not something to be fearful of. It's a new way to express artistic vision. And then we're playing a video game of people who have like dedicated their careers to this type of artistic vision. So throwing that in there also just kind of ties all that in. It's really cool. I agree with you. There's a lot of layers to the fact that computers are so important throughout here. When the rest of it, it's more forms of art that people are more romantic about, like film and
it's so much more analog and like
magic
tactile
shows and shit like that.
Yeah. Like the old forms of doing things that we look back on so fondly. You're right. Like visual art or whatever it might be, graphic design, the way that it changes throughout eras and everything, I think is especially interesting. Like the way that they do the sort of, I don't know what the exact word is, but the circus art posters that do the art for that, the way that all looks, and then the art design that's done for all of Lorenzo's or Renzo. It's the same person. The posters for the movies, the way that they look, it's like it all changes in so many interesting and fluid ways. Like it's so geometric, those designs, but then that informs so much of like her Lorelei's puzzle design. Also, it's like so geometric, and like the crossover between those two. I think the contrast between those two characters and the fact that Lorelei is drawn to somebody who at times is so self-obsessed and yet so, like you've said multiple times now, like such an auteur for all the good and bad that comes with that label, for her to be so drawn to that and yet be so logical and so like left-brained about everything, or whichever side does the math. For her to be so into that it's just so much fun to think about the relationship between those two characters, whether or not it's good. Like you said, abusive at times. It's like I feel like so many artists, especially in a commercial space, have a story that is a Lorelei and Renzo
Oh yeah,
scenario.
I'm sure. Yeah. Speaking of, kind of relating back to that, when he finally goes over the deep end and he's chasing her around with a gun and kind of forces her to push him out the window, it's presented as a thing in the game where like he'll ask you a question and you have like an option of what to say. I forget the exact details of it, but if you say the wrong thing, he'll be like, nope, that's not your line or something like that. And then you're forced to get up and push him out of the window. During that scene, his eyes are clawed out. It's just empty sockets for eyes. And I wondered if you had a read on that in particular, because there's this whole, in a bunch of the documents, there's this talk of a secret society, the third eye and things like that. Did you have a read on that?
I took that as a non-literal representation of that sort of thing. I don't think the third eye is actually, I've been reading The House of Leaves recently for the first time. I'm like, I'm fighting through it. It's very good, but it's like drinking a can of Guinness. You got to go real slow. So I've been making my way through it, but I definitely feel there are some parallels between the story in Lorelei and the Laser Eyes and House of Leaves, or at least in the way it's represented. And I feel like the way that story is told, House of Leaves, about the existence of a fan base for a book or a movie, sorry, that doesn't, or maybe does exist. Who's to say what's real? Unreliable narrators. The way that has gone, and sort of the reflection of the Third Eye Club or whatever in Lorelei and the Laser Eyes, to me isn't so much real as it is like a hopeful thing. Like she sees the third eye as, I mean, that's the failed project that they never finished, right?
Right.
Or well, did they? There's a fan base for it, but I felt like when I saw that moment where Lorenzo gets his eyes scratched out and that becomes like a big part of the story, is like it's sort of her applying a perspective on it, because it's her remembering that final moment. Who's to say how much of that is true, right? And in traumatic moments, things become warped and reality shifts and changes for so many people. I mean, when they're trying to describe their own trauma, it's impossible for it to be a fully representative, because there's so many emotions attached to it. So I have to imagine a lot of what happened there is still up for interpretation. Even that moment was likely an unreliable one. And then her own memory of the future, everything that happened from that point onward, could be completely, maybe she's seeing people because of that moment, the trauma that comes along with that. She ended up siloing herself off, right, and escaping the art world. Who's to say the third eye isn't some imagined what's the word, like stalkers or something who know about the thing she did, and she's imagining that sort of thing happening. So I always thought, I think there's that part is so interesting, the like unreliability of your own memory, especially how it relates to trauma and anything regarding that. Like, it's so interesting how it's told. And even in the moment of pure like display of like, this is the denouement, enjoy, here's your final climax. They're like, you still don't believe what's going on, man. A blind guy almost shoots somebody. That's not how that works. He would be writhing in pain.
That's the thing, right? Like, even the things that seem the most real or presented in the most real way in the game are still, if we're to believe it, this person lying on their deathbed working through their memories from decades ago at this point. So who knows, A, what's real, but B, if it is real, how accurate is it like that? So I didn't see this as like, well, I saw it possibly two ways, that perhaps he got involved in this, third eye cult activity. The seekers of true knowledge, we see that it's kind of a trope in a lot of stories, right? Like, it's like the opposite of Bloodborne. Like, in order to seek true knowledge, you must remove your eyes because they're hindering you from seeing the truth, something like that. So it could have been something like that, or it could have just been a visual metaphor for how blinded he was to everything else around him at the time of his death.
If his death for sure, like he ignored the reality of his own work and how it was sort of hindering his relationships and making things worse, and he was like asking his protege in his own mind anyway to hurt him, right? Like, isn't that part of the story is like, I want you to kill me. Like, isn't that kind of what he's getting at?
So this is the other like interpretation of it that I think is pretty cool. That the script that was like unfinished goes through these events of like Lorelei comes, they're going to do work on the computer. Lorelei doesn't quite follow his vague ass like suggestions for what she should be doing, and he gets upset, and then he loses his mind and starts chasing her around with a gun, and the story ends with him threatening her and her pushing him out of a window in the fiction. And so I think that one cool way to read this is that he was trying to do this in real life, and this was going to be his final work of art, was this like a performance piece. There was one earlier in the game that's like a very toned down version of this, but just like a work of art where you walk past a window and someone throws a brick through it, and that's the art, is the scene of someone being shocked by a brick breaking the window next to them, which made me laugh. I just imagine going to a gallery and seeing the one person that they could possibly do that to.
No one would ever walk past that window until they close the exhibit.
And so it got me thinking, because he had talked in previous memos about how he wanted to make art that didn't need an audience, because he was probably bitter that people didn't like and wouldn't fund his stuff. So I think that his idea was, this is going to be my final work of art. It requires no audience. It requires probably a very unwilling participant to help me do this. But this is his fucked up idea for his masterpiece, because fuck the audience. Art doesn't need an audience. I'm just going to do this. And this is my final form of expression, which we're talking about like the auteur of auteurs to like a dangerous level in the game. So that read makes a lot of sense to me. It's a fucked up thing to do to another person, but as the limits of how far this crazed obsession can take somebody, I think it's kind of cool.
I think you mentioned Birdman earlier, and I think that has a very similar sort of conclusion, right? Where I'm going to do it again.
Remember, that was a long time ago. Yeah, Michael Keaton.
Not Kevin Conroy. Michael Keaton does his final performance, almost final performance, and like shoots himself with a gun for real on stage in the play, and hurts himself and bleeds for his art. And I think that's something that tends to come up in the sort of over the top artists, people like Renzo who can't scale back their desire to fully give themselves to their art, where they're like literally bleeding for your art, wanting to die for your art. It's like an important part of the storytelling that your pain be part of the creation of it. Is so interesting, because it's like Renzo and whatever Michael Keaton's character's name is in Birdman, I guess Birdman, is so like central to those characters, but also is clearly something that they're doing because they don't know how to express themselves further. Like they feel as though they've reached the end of their ability to create their art, whether that's performing or literally making movies, or in whatever weird way Lorenzo was trying to make the third eye. It's like you reach a certain point where you have to almost like you've reached the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, baby. It's time to self-actualize myself with a pistol. Let's do it.
I was going to say, like, there's no further escalation that you can do. If that's the type of thing that you're doing, is escalating the type of performance or whatever, you can't go further than that.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's, especially if it's a story about your pain or a character's pain, it's like, how could I show that any more strongly than literally experiencing pain or death or whatever? It's such a, the fact that we're talking about this, by the way, about a video game that like underlines the solutions to puzzles in pink ink in letters is like so funny. I think for all the seriousness that we've talked about Lorelei and the Laser Eyes, I think this is a very funny video game. This is such a serious artistic video game. This shit is funny as hell. Can I read you, by the way, I don't know if you bothered to look into them. When you get items in your inventory, all of them have item descriptions.
Yes.
They're very funny. One of them in particular that I want to read out is for the crank that you get fairly early on. on in the game.
All
You
right,
find it in the
the
backyard.
classic Resident Evil hand crank.
Yes, like such a ubiquitous video game thing to find, especially in escape rooms. The description for it, and I'll try to not speed read it. Found in the backyard, made out of steel, and has started to rust. A rare instance of a crank appearing by itself and not as part of a mechanical construction. In media, such as video games, cranks tend to go missing or are concealed in mysterious manners and are often part of item-related puzzles. Since cranks rarely appear by themselves like this in reality, it is extremely valuable and could likely be sold for thousands of dollars to video game aficionados. That is the item description in a video game that we have spent the last 2 hours saying is an artistic masterpiece.
That's great.
Is gaming to me, folks.
That's great. Yeah, it's good stuff. I hadn't like clocked this as a particularly funny game when I think about it, we'll say. Because it's a very self-serious game on the surface. But you're right, those item descriptions are funny. Some of the conversations are just like witty and funny too. Like I enjoyed that. I mean, there's a little easy gag when you first start the game up. The only thing in your inventory is tampons that, as far as I know, you never use throughout the game.
Right, yeah. I don't think I ever used it. Like it was always just sitting in the inventory, and I was like, "Is this for something?" I remember Simogo tweeting that there was a puzzle that nobody had solved yet in the game. I don't know if that's been resolved. I can't look into it, but I was like, "It's got to be the tampon." Like,
yeah, it
gotta
has to
play
be
for 30 days, and then eventually your period starts, and you gotta use it.
I was like, I was like, I'm not going to get caught by the thing that catches me in some games where it's like I pick up a key item early in the game that's very important at the end of the game. I'm not going to get caught in Lorelei and the Laser Eyes. When the tampon puzzle comes up, I'm going to be ready, and it never came up.
What a sentence. Show me another video game where you say something like, when the tampon puzzle shows up, I'll be ready.
So I think you're onto something. I think it is a funny game. Funnier than you would expect from playing, seeing screenshots or listening to the first 2 hours of this episode. Yeah.
It's dark humor in a way that I did not expect it to be funny. Like that first trailer still makes me think this is going to be an esoteric, serious video game for people who like silent films and French art and black and white movies. And then, you get a line, I posted this on Blue Sky, you get a line like, would you agree that true art has the power to be terrorism? Like, which is such a fucking Jacob Geller-ass question to ask about art.
Yes, it is.
Like, so good, but goddamn, that's funny. Like, that is a funny thing to say in a game where I just solved number puzzles.
It's a funny thing to say to another person, right? Because isn't that a line that Renzo says to your character as you're going through? It's like, that's not a normal thing to say to another person.
Like, I just sat down. Can you ask me a normal question? Like, how are you?
Yeah. Would you like a coffee?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that'd be $1.
Nothing like that. Yeah. But I do think that like this game is really cool because it absolutely contains the entire conversation that we just had in this spoiler section about art and artists, trying to escalate and all of those things. It absolutely contains that in like the text of the game, but it's something that you don't have to experience as like, it's not like on Front Street for everybody to be like, this is something that we're going to make you listen to us talk about or muse on as you're going through the puzzles. It's kind of like you're going to read how the characters feel. And a lot of the conversation we just had is connecting the dots that's like not explicitly said. And so I think it's really cool that the game does appeal on that surface level of like, okay, it's a game about artists and it's a game about doing puzzles and stuff like that. And then if you really want to connect the dots, you can get into like what I think is a really interesting conversation about the nature of artists and, other forces that may conflict with what they want to do as artists, etc. But it's like, it's like, if this might be a dumb thing to say, but if Hideo Kojima made this game, you would listen to a 35-minute conversation about these exact things.
There would be a guy called Puzzle Solve Man who would tell
exactly,
you.
Yeah. And so like Kojima's the punching bag for these types of comparisons, but it's like really cool how all of this is 100% in the game, but you got to work for it and talk and discuss to really dig into it. It's like one of those games where I'm surprised there's not more video essay analysis of this. This seems like prime material for it. But, I did some searching. I couldn't find a ton.
It's because they're all too dumb to solve the puzzles. You heard it here first, folks. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. They're like, it's just one of those games where I feel like there's so much to talk about that you kind of need this format. It's so open to interpretation that I feel like if you try to make a definitive piece that like really breaks down the narrative, it does it a disservice when you try to sit down and have an authoritative voice on it. But then also, like, I think that's why this works, because you have two people with totally different perspectives on it, talking through their own ideas on like what makes it work and what doesn't. And to your point, like, this is a game that if you just wanted to solve puzzles, you can just do that. You don't have to read the notes. Like you said, like all the information is super clear, super straightforward. You don't really need to read through everything to piece it together. Like stuff you need is underlined. If it's not, it's very straightforward, or it's like explaining a concept you might not understand. This is not a game that demands that you understand its plot. It's a game that is willing to give you another puzzle to solve, which is its own narrative. And
yeah,
like any good, weird maze, it turns out there's no answer. And you just like, there's no real start end to the story of this game. It's kind of just one you're doing and you find out there was never a solution to begin with, which I think is really cool.
It's also cool that even if we came into this discussion with two pretty different interpretations of multiple things, including like, key things about that ending cutscene. That's like the biggest direct storytelling you get. The two separate viewpoints that we came into it with had like very clear and obvious overlaps in like, yeah, okay, so like if this is the case, then this is, we can go off on this tangent too. So stuff like that is really cool. I mean, I love a game where I remember our Signalis episode on the show where we basically just threw out like 5 nutso completely separate interpretations of that story. And this one's like, there's a lot more overlap between the theories. Because I think what's important, the thematic content of it, the stuff that you're going to have those conversations about is really consistent. And the game at least lets you know that this is what we're talking about here. And then it's up to you to fill in those blanks of what do you think is actually real? Who do you think these people actually are? Is anything that you see in the game actually real?
Yeah. Is it all a metaphor?
Stuff like that. Yeah. So, great conversation, man. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this with me.
Yeah, of course. The same to you. This has been absolutely a blast. I love talking about this game. I haven't had an opportunity to talk to anyone else who's finished it for this long. So this has been really cathartic for me. So thank you so much. Thank you for having me on the show at all.
Of course. Yeah. It's always fun, especially with games like this that like go deeper and like, unless you're going to, I always joke, like it's kind of weird that I do this like once a week with usually a complete stranger. Like I don't sit and talk to my best friends for 2.5 hours about one particular game, So it is great to have this opportunity. And I really appreciate what you brought to the discussion. So thanks for joining. And one more call for everyone at the end to please check out everything that Jesse is doing, including No Clip stuff, No Clip documentaries, podcast, and Blowback was the other one, right?
Yes, sir.
All right, and Blowback, yeah. So check down in the show notes for links to that stuff. I'm sure that you will like what you find down there. And if you're here all the way at the end, I appreciate you. You're my hero. Tune in next week for the next game to come out of the backlog.
Hey.
Oh, hey, Jeff.
What's going on, guys?
Oh, talking about Superman.
Oh, cool. I could talk about Superman.
I could talk some more about Superman.
We know.
I'll bet a few people would want to get in on this.
I'm down.
You know it.
That sounds like fun. I'll do it.
Cool, let's do it. We can call the show Men of Steel.
And you can find it at certainpov.com.
Or wherever you get your podcasts.
Yay!
Hello, my name is Aaron. I'm one half of Superpod Saga, a topical variety video game podcast fueled entirely by nostalgia and unleaded gasoline. Superpod Saga, we discuss a different video game topic each and every week. We have new episodes every single Monday covering a different video game topic. More than anything, we want to entertain our listeners and make you feel like you're one of the boys, like you're hanging out at a campfire with some of your best zany, caffeine-powered buddies and just talking about your favorite games and all that stuff. Stop on down to Superpod Saga. It's on every podcatcher there is. If it's not, let me know and we'll get on it. But again, Superpod Saga, stop on by.